All right, give me 1 minute.
I don't mind if I try to turn the heat down. So, yeah.
What's 77? All right. Julie, you're all right with me getting going?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. My name is James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. Today is Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. It's 1:01 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Just as the first order of business, I wanted to amend the agenda. We have a executive session scheduled for after we get through the executive director report. There's actually a kind of complex application that I would like to add to that executive agenda and move it ahead of the executive director report. So we can kind of deliberate about that issue in addition to what was noticed, which was hemp. Also, so this is my fault. We are going to walk through the advertising lawsuit settlement. We did settle the case. We have a signed agreement between the CCB and the plaintiff. But I didn't realize that we hadn't filed it with the court yet, or the court hadn't accepted it. And so just in the interest of not saying something that, until it's fully finalized, I think I'm going to just save that for the next meeting. However, at that next meeting, we will kind of walk through what the settlement does and how it's going to impact people's processes with respect to kind of submitting advertisements and having them approved, and what's kind of going to change about our processes. Any other changes to the agenda? Nope.
No.
Okay. Then I just have a few brief opening remarks. We have a lot of guests today, so I don't want to kind of belabor this, but I just wanted to talk about the medical use endorsement. Let's see, that's some notes about this. Richard. So we made after just kind of going through a procurement nightmare. We do have an agreement signed. We made tremendous progress on getting this medical use enhanced training up to speed. Sorry, no worries. I had some notes that I seem to have misplaced. Just wanted to make sure I say all this correctly. All right, well, I'll just kind of go off the cuff here. Essentially, what I wanted to say is that this training is going to be a 4-hour long training. We're aiming for kind of mid-November for the first training. We can do up to 5. The goal is to do them at kind of defined intervals throughout the end of this year and next. Each one can has a 60-person capacity. And we're going to try to prioritize for that first training the employees of the retailers that are actively seeking or already have a medical use endorsement, as it is a prerequisite that you have an employee kind of on call that's trained, that has received this advanced training. So we're going to kind of be reaching out over the next weeks to those retailers, but there will be a sign-up link on our website where we're going to kind of keep a rolling list of people that are interested in seeking this. I would note that this is a free training and it's available to anyone with an employee ID card, regardless of whether you are actively working in a retail shop, but we are going to prioritize those. You're going to get a certification at the end. There'll be a test and a certification that you can carry with you. And it can be, so if you're not actively working in a medical use endorsement as a bud tender, but you think you might want to at someday, then, you probably should take the class and get certified. I know that the timeline is not, is not fast enough for many people, patients especially. But really, I just want to stress that how the use of cannabis is communicated to consumers, and particularly communicated to patients who by definition have a complex medical history, is of extreme anxiety to the legislature, and to, just everyone knows that we live in a world where cannabis is a Schedule I controlled substance, and the research opportunities are very minimal, and people don't fully have the training at medical schools to have the conversations that we would expect. Bud tenders are, kind of they have a very important role in making sure that accurate and logic, factual information is being conveyed to patients, and we really just can't get this wrong. So, the timing is what it is, and we'll do our best to, reduce any further delays. And I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So the last thing we have to do before we turn to our first guest is to approve our minutes from our last regular board meeting, which is on August 27th, and our mid-month evidentiary hearing, which is on September 10th. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Aye. Sorry. So first on our agenda, we have Paul Connor. Oh, sorry. First on our agenda, sorry, Paul, is public comment. And if anyone would like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. We'll call on you in the order that you raise your hand, and then we'll move to anyone who joined via phone. Right. If you join via phone and would like to make a public comment, you can hit *6 to unmute your line. Okay, I will close the public comment window now, Paul. I think we're ready for you. Oh, sorry, Paul. Jeffrey, would you like to comment?
Oh, did I make it? Sorry, I'm jumping between meetings here. I apologize, everybody. Yep. Well, I guess good afternoon now. Good to see everybody. I hope you guys have a good meeting. I just want to briefly just leave a comment. I know y'all are going to be talking about retail siting. I just want to put on the table, just so perhaps we're all on the same page. Looking at the charges, the directives that came from the General Assembly over the years, right? This is an ongoing issue specific to retail siting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe the last charge from them, from legislators to all of you, still falls on the 2024 charge. There was nothing that came out of Act 56 this past session. There were attempts. So I just want to put that on the table. I don't know, what that means for the discussion that you all are going to have. But that charge is still on the table. That work that you all did over the past year is still on the table. As I have mentioned in the past, it was not filed. But I just want to make that known. And I hope that you all see that as well. But I believe that is accurate when it comes to this work, such that the legislative session in 2024 charged you all for to develop retail siting around things like geographical distribution, market demand, population, and whatnot. And then you proceeded to develop that work. And then there was an attempt to revisit that, but I think that attempt fizzled out. And so I'm just wondering, what you all see, if you see that as well. And I'll just stop there. And I appreciate you letting me speak. Sorry, I was coming in late here. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks for the comment. Okay, Paul, I think now we are ready for you. So just by way of kind of introduction and a disclaimer, Paul and I have known each other for a number of years, long before I ever had this role. Paul is the Director of Planning and Zoning for the city of South Burlington. And just to provide a little bit of context as to why we'd like you to kind of help us today is it's around the issue of retail siting, the siting of retail establishments in the state. This is a really complex, kind of thorny issue for the board, who has only until recently had any authority on retail setting at all, but also has a tough time making a policy, like a one size fits all policy here around this table that can apply to the very unique aspects and features of every town in Vermont. Some people would like to see retail stores kind of maybe near on an existing police route, for instance. So if there is an incident, the police can respond quickly. Some people would like to see them kind of out on the outskirts of town so that, kids don't have to walk by them on their way to school. It's just hard for us to really kind of make a policy that fits for everyone. Act 164, which created the board, I think the legislature back then was anticipating that an unfriendly municipal government may try to effectively prohibit cannabis retail establishments through zoning in towns where the voters had opted into retail sales. And so they included in 7 VSA 863 very kind of odd language where you have all of the traditional zoning and in ordinance authorities, but you can't create zoning that would have the effect of prohibiting the operation of a cannabis establishment. So I think towns have been kind of left to grapple with this. I think it's been confusing for them. They don't know what that really means, because I feel like every zoning ordinance has the effect of prohibiting some operation from doing something somewhere. So is there any way to, what is the kind of through line here? So I thought it'd be very useful to hear from you about how zoning works in the non-cannabis context, and maybe apply some of those principles to zoning of retail cannabis establishments. Because we also kind of heard last year that, from a number of people that have jurisdiction over our issue, that if towns only had more clarity and more precision about how they can zone cannabis retail establishments, it's his opinion that more towns would opt in to retail sales, and that would increase the kind of geographic distribution. We'd see less clustering of retail stores in, I mean, Burlington is kind of ground zero for this. 13 stores within like a half-mile radius. If only towns knew what their authority was and they could, have more precision about cannabis zoning, that we might see more towns opt in, which is, I think, better for people, better for the industry, better for kind of consumers. I have a number of questions for you. I don't know if you wanted to start with any introductory remarks, or we could just jump to questions.
Sure. Just very briefly, just to say my background and our role, and then I'll help you to jump in directly to your questions. So Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of South Burlington. I've been in this role for about 17 years. Prior to that, I worked with the Rutland Regional Planning Commission and helped towns with their zoning and town plans all throughout Rutland County. So I have some experience in both the bigger and the smaller communities. South Burlington has at this time not opted in. And so what I am speaking of is a general, zoning authority without any, goal for South Burlington. So I'm speaking, I think that in some ways is kind of handy here, that I'm not speaking from the perspective of a need for South Burlington. I'm speaking as a professional planner who works for the City of South Burlington.
That's great. Yep. Yeah. Can we just start at the 101 level?
Sure.
Can you just, the law says that towns have all of their traditional zoning, ordinance and bylaw authority. Can you tell me what the kind of difference between those two authorities might be?
Sure. So there's some overlap between what an ordinance can do and what a bylaw can do. In the context of this discussion, the subject is really essentially about regulating land uses, land development activities, scale of development. Most communities would opt to regulate that kind of zoning because it is a more permanent activity, like the building of a structure is a reasonably permanent thing. Ordinances more typically deal with ongoing things like speeding or parking or noise or things like that. The enforcement mechanisms are a little bit different. So ordinances by tickets through to the Judicial Bureau, whereas bylaws can go through Superior Court and get relief where the court can say you must tear that building down because you built it in the wrong place. Most communities, like I said, for something like this will use bylaws, but some communities have chosen not to have zoning at all. And so there are circumstances where, let's say, a town says, all we want to do is regulate floodplains, as a zoning type issue. But instead of doing it as a bylaw, they would do it as an ordinance because zoning might be a 4-letter word in that town.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of broadly the categories. And that's kind of the enabling ability.
That's great. The kind of heart of the issue for me is if you might be able to describe the authority that municipalities have to zone distinct or novel business types, like not just kind of like retail, commercial, but like gas stations or liquor stores or childcare centers.
So zoning has a lot of case law across the country on it. Goes all the way back to Supreme Court Euclid decision in 1924. Municipalities have a pretty broad authority to determine the scale of development, i.e. the size of a building or the amount, the location of where that can take place at what scales, and the uses. And municipalities can use a wide range of categorization from, very precise uses that says that a bagel shop is different from a bakery, all the way up to very broad categories where similar activities might be grouped. So, for example, in South Burlington, we just adopted some amendments streamlining our regulations where we created one big category called consumer-facing commercial, which is everything including a bank, a restaurant, a grocery store, a bar, basically all the things where people go to do a thing as a consumer. But a community might also choose to be much more hyper-specific. An example that you gave, a gas station could and often is different from an auto mechanic because there may be purposes. Fundamentally, it all comes down to what is the planning purpose of dividing two uses from one another? What makes a mechanic different from a gas station? If you've got a legitimate reason for it, then you can separate them.
Could a municipality require, I should say, that certain business types be screened from public view, like any kind of 21 plus business type or ones? Is that going too far, do you think?
I would say that is pushing it. I'm not directly familiar with case law on this. It's a tricky one because the subject that we're talking about specifically aside, most businesses, it is in the mutual interest of the business and the municipality to want to have the business be visible. So there's probably not a ton in there. There is a lot of case law in sign law, which is a little bit similar, where the Supreme Court fairly recently has, said that it is legitimate to have, say that signs can be big or small. So you're not guaranteed a 400 square foot sign advertising your business. It's a little bit along the lines what you're speaking about. I think it would depend on what it means by screening, because a business, generally speaking, would have the right to announce itself, and so zoning that says that you then can't might be a little tricky on the zoning side.
Can you talk a little bit about, if we ever touch on an issue that you're not really permitted to talk about, just feel free to just shut me down. But can you talk a little bit how Burlington zones liquor stores currently?
I can speak about how South Burlington zones liquor stores.
Yes, sorry about that.
Yeah, so so I think this is a really good example. For us, for a long time, setting aside what we've just most recently done, we had retail sales and grocery sales as use categories. In South Burlington, the use has been the sale of groceries, but there may be a product within that that has a separate level of control. And so municipalities and the state have liquor control board rules that may say that for whatever reason, there can only be by the state X number of liquor stores in a town. The use category, insofar as zoning is concerned, might be in South Burlington or is now consumer facing commercial, before that retail sales or grocery sales. Whether they're allowed to sell the product of liquor in there is subject to a licensure through the local the liquor control board, which is the select board. Does that make sense?
It does,
A
yeah.
community might choose to create liquor store as its own use category. They could, just as my example before of the bakery versus the bagel shop. They could. In South Burlington, we put it under the broader category of retail, and then let the licensure determine the sale of an individual product within it.
I was going to move to a different theme of questions. Does anyone want to keep pulling on this thread, though?
Are you going to talk about conditional use?
I was going to talk about it in the. Hey, why don't you ask your question, though?
Well, it might come up later, but so you're talking about the uses that a town in their zoning, they say that this is a liquor store and that's the use of this property. Can you talk a little bit about when the use of that changes and what that process looks like and what the town does on their end?
Sure. So a couple of things within that. One thing that is, I think, difference between a licensure that might be through a cannabis control or a liquor control board at the municipal level or state level versus zoning is the authority for a use goes with the land. So the ownership can transfer. The property has the right to retain its use. So if we say you're allowed to be a restaurant, then as long as that restaurant stays active, that is guaranteed, even if our zoning changes. So our zoning could change and say this is a residential only district. That becomes a non-conforming use, and under state law has the right to continue in perpetuity so long as they don't abandon that use. When I read 7 VSA 863, and when I think of a little bit of a parallel to liquor control, I think that becomes sort of the important distinction of licensure of a business operation that is subject to renewal and making sure that they're following the practices that are established versus the use, which would be allowed by right. I think that partially answered your question.
Yes, I think what I'm trying to make sure I understand is that if something is already the use is already a retail store, for example, as long as it's a retail store that is in there, the change of use is not the process that the new owner has to go through. It already has, regardless of what kind of retail, or I forget what you just said, the public facing, what you used as a category, public facing.
Yes, I mean, so in practice, what would happen is oftentimes a new business comes into a storefront, let's say, and they would confirm with us as to whether that is the same use or if it's a different use. So, a clothing store that sells one type of clothing switches to another brand of clothing, that's pretty straightforward. It's a clothing store. That clothing store that becomes a yoga studio, depending on the local zoning, might be a change of use or might not. And so oftentimes new businesses will be, when there's a judgment call to be made, we'll say, here's what we are. Is that the same use or is that a change of use?
Yeah. I'm just trying to get out what the complexities can be.
Yes, this is the area is highly complex.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
And I think, creating a new use category sometimes creates that challenge. So if a community were to say, it's not a bad thing, it's just, it is what it is. If a community were to create a new category, and let's say before it just said retail, and now there's a new category called, let's say, cannabis retail, then presumably the intent is that that's a different use. And so somebody going from, you know, a clothing store to a cannabis sales in this case would probably be considered a change of use because the municipality has since that time created a new category which is more precise and specific to what is being asked. Just like if we were to create a new category that said clothing sales from what used to be, you know, general commercial. But that would sometimes be a case by case determination of, you know, what were they granted before, and is it a continuation of that, or is it a new thing?
And that goes before a public board, right? That the judgment call, does that go before your?
Not necessarily.
No. Okay.
Depends. Municipalities are granted the authority for a zoning administrator to do most of that work.
Yep.
Municipalities get the authority to set the threshold as to what goes to the development review board. Any
Okay.
decision of the administrative officer, when it is an administrative decision, is appealable to the development review board. So either way, there's an option for a public board.
Okay, thank you.
And what role just in South Burlington specifically, what role does the planning commission play versus the select board or city council versus the development review board in adopting or changing use?
Yep. So under statute, zoning bylaws must start with the local planning commission. So the planning commission is responsible for preparing the draft, holding a public hearing, and submitting their recommendation to the legislative body, city council, or select board. The select board then has the responsibility, if they want to move it forward, of holding their own public hearing and then making the decision. They get the ultimate choice. After they have made their decision, there's an option for a decision to be petitioned to go to a public vote, but that is pretty rare. That's the authority on the legislative side. In most communities in Vermont that have zoning, they have established a development review board. The development review board's job is to act as a quasi-judicial body to interpret the regulations. So either an appeal of the zoning administrator or, say, a conditional use application. They review actual applications, not the rules being prepared.
How long on that kind of the legislative side, the adoption or change, how long does that process take? I'm trying to ascertain if we're going to try to grant more authority to municipalities over this, how much of a runway do you think, right. a South Burlington, I know every town has different levels of resources, but.
Right. I mean, every town's going to be different. I would say at a minimum, it's typically about 3 to 4 months is realistic because of all the hearings required in statute. Beyond that, it really comes down to it's a legislative process, right? So anything that's a legislative process can take anywhere from one meeting to however long they choose to make, right? Because it's not an application, it's a legislative process. So they have the right to do it. I'd say, larger communities in Vermont typically do one-ish round of amendments per year. Smaller ones might go years in between, but then something of importance to the community comes up and they make a change. So it's hard to say. It really comes down to each town, but it's typically a minimum of 3 or 4 months if there was something that was, hey, we want to do a thing. Yeah.
So you had suggested that, incumbent businesses kind of, as long as they maintain their, continuous licensure or whatever else, continuous use, if there's a use change, they're generally not impacted by that use change. Have you ever seen it where there was no prior zoning bylaw or use, and then all of a sudden there was, and there are existing businesses? And again, I'm thinking about Burlington with their existing, cannabis retailers. If they all of a sudden, in 2026 passed a bylaw about cannabis retail, what would the impact be to the incumbent licensees?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the interesting question for you guys to wrestle with, the difference between the use and the license to operate within a building that has the use. So um, the use, I can't speak to Burlington specifically because I don't know if Burlington set it up as a zoning subject of cannabis sales is a zoning use category if it was just retail that happened to get a license to on top of that do that. So I can't
Okay.
really speak to that part.
Okay.
The zoning part of it, if it newly existed from a broader category, I think would have to be a case by case determination of is it a continuation of the prior understood use, or is it something completely new that is coming forward? If something had been operating for several years as a thing, and then there's a new use category that specifically calls it out, I'd say there's a reasonable chance, I'm not an attorney, but there's a reasonable chance that that would, from a zoning perspective, be considered a continuation of it. But I think that's the separation from where a licensure comes in. Licensures might have a duration, and just as the cities of Burlington and South Burlington have established licenses for short-term rentals, for example, through capacities, you could have rules that establish, what does it take to renew a license, how many licenses are given out, et cetera.
Yeah. I only have one question left, and it's mostly, I could talk with you all day, but it's mostly just out of time constraints. So are there, if you think about the underlying concern in 863 that motivated 7 VSA 863, it was that in kind of antagonistic or kind of, a planning commission, select board, whatever, municipality that was anti-cannabis might try and zone people out of existence or try and spot zone someone so that it only benefits, their neighbor or whatever else, or uncle. Are there protections against that, against kind of overly restrictive zoning?
So the language in 7 VSA that specifically talks about the municipality shall not, it is odd language because it's in the same level of numerette or whatever it is as the authority to establish through the voters. So it is a little bit unusual and odd. Some of it is just sort of, it almost feels like it should have been one tab in. But there is a lot of case law about spot zoning. Spot zoning is when essentially a property is zoned in one way without consideration of the context of what's around it and to potentially benefit a singular place. So if we were to say this is our low density residential neighborhood, but here's this one guy who really wanted to do a 10-story building, so let's allow that property to be a 10-story building, there's a good chance that would be spot zoning. That said, it all comes to what is the process and what is the public interest of a property having a different zoning. So it is possible, so a lot of our historic Vermont towns have some big hulking building in the middle of an old neighborhood that it may be a great public purpose to reuse that building. Maybe it was a school 50 years ago. It might have its own zoning. That's not necessarily problematic if, the homework has been done and it's been properly considered as to why it deserves to be treated differently. In our community, we have one parcel that happens to be an international airport. It shares very little in common from a zoning perspective with the properties around it. It's okay that it's got its own zoning district because there's a public purpose behind it. That's what it comes down to with this. So spot zoning definitely has a lot of case law saying that's not allowed, and it is cured by robust public process in the public interest.
So I got one last one for you, Paul, if you don't mind. The reason why we're interested in this is for what I mentioned before, which is it's really hard for us to develop a one-size-fits-all kind of retail siting rule, that accommodates the unique features of every town or just the public sentiment in every town that's opted in. But are we, by creating if the legislature, are they just shifting a problem to you that most towns wouldn't want? I mean, is this a contentious kind of annoying new thing that you would have, or do you think most towns, and this is just your opinion, most towns would actually appreciate this kind of authority to have more control over cannabis retail?
I think broadly speaking, towns would prefer to have the authority to do, if they're opting in, to choose what's right for them, whether they want to have it only on the highway or only in the downtown or in both or whatever they're choosing. I think that clarity about what the licensure role is, and is that what lives with the select board as the cannabis control board to be able to say, what do they have jurisdiction over? Because when I, briefly read 7 VSA 863, it sort of put it to you all to establish what those rules are in terms of, if a municipality wanted to have a X number, is that the cannabis control board at the state that determines that? Is that the local select board? That having clarity on things like that would take the pressure off that being the zoning issue, which is fundamentally a use, not a product subject. So that would be my suggestion.
This has been great. Any last questions on this?
No, thank you, Paul. Hopefully it can be a resource moving forward.
That's what I've
My
been
pleasure,
saying.
and anytime.
Hey, that's been great. Thank you, Paul. So our next guests are from the Department of Health. We have Rhonda Williams. Hello. And is it Melissa Chapman? Is she?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So again, we're really struggling with, we are in the process. We were given authority to have more control over retail siting. I know you were just listening in on the conversation. It's a really challenging policy for us. I can say that some of our motivation, if you look at our advertising laws, the statutes, and kind of other aspects of the kind of original cannabis bill, there's a pretty clear directive that, the legislature wants us to prevent overconsumption of cannabis among the adult population and avoid marketing to kids, either directly or indirectly. And one thing that, I was in some hearing with the lead sponsor of the original legislation, and, I had asked them what success in the implementation of this policy might look like. And his response was something to the effect of, just try to avoid some of the mistakes that we've made in alcohol and tobacco and other kind of regulated states, other regulated industries. And I know that this is kind of, Department of Health has been very focused on retail density in the tobacco and alcohol sense. And the hope today is to maybe just hear the kind of the outcomes of that research that you've done, and just kind of walk through some of the considerations that might not be totally obvious to us right now when we're thinking about this question of retail siting. Is that all right? Does that seem?
Yeah, we are ready to talk about that. Go ahead, you. Rhonda.
Okay, so I'm Rhonda Williams. I'm with Vermont Department of Health. I'm in the Division of Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, and a public health program director. So this has been educational already. And before I start sharing slides, I'll just share with you in terms of licensing, that has been a big focal point for tobacco control nationally. Some states didn't have licensing for tobacco control. Oregon, for example, was one of them, and in the last 3 years established a rigorous licensure program. In part because research shows that it can help curtail the starting and the continuation of a substance due to the criteria you can establish around licensing. We have seen that some towns have really struggled with limiting the impact of, and I'll speak to today with Melissa, tobacco retailers. And we prepared some slides from you that takes from national and state evidence, and happy to answer any questions along the way or at the end. So this certainly is a major part of our work, and happy to talk about it today. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will go smoothly. Okay, so. Okay. And I'm really pleased to be here with Dr. Chapman, because she and I have worked together for 6 years in tobacco control. We've done quite a few evaluations together, and we're going to share some findings today around our work over the years and understanding the retail landscape in order to inform our decision making, but importantly of legislators and policymakers too. So in just thinking about why this topic and in tobacco control, we wanted to set the stage a little bit. And I think really importantly, as a director of the tobacco control program, my work, our team's work, is to bring down prevalence. And, you know, just seeing here, like, right, we have like 84, nearly 85,000 adults and high school students, and this is not counting middle school students, who in the past 30 days have used one or more tobacco products. Many of them are using more than one. And the co-use with cannabis is quite high too. And so importantly is that in 2012, we started prioritizing, because of what the data showed us, that those who are low income, low socioeconomic status, smoke at higher rates. And smoking combustible products, tobacco combustible products, a lot of research around the driving force around premature death. So it's our job in public health to reduce that. But you see here that we're still dealing with high use rates, and that I'll just say, we meet with our state Medicaid office every quarter to talk about how we can bring down the 27% of adults insured by Medicaid, 25% who are uninsured who smoke, which is more than double what is private insurance. In fact, it's almost triple, I think. And that we have nearly a 30% use rate among those with high school education. So we take this all really seriously. Ideally, we would have prevented it from happening in the first place. So tobacco use behaviors are associated with price, access, and density. And we have 740 licensed tobacco retailers in Vermont, and you'll see more about what that looks like. Okay, so sorry about that. So why density matters? This has been a field that's researchers have looked at, and that CDC, so as a CDC-funded tobacco control program, the research started to be brought to us as programs in 2012, because the research was showing that it is associated with higher initiation among youth and young adults, and continued use, youth and adults. And as we see in Vermont, is that it is the higher retail density is associated with higher use in low income and minority neighborhoods. And why is it so impactful? Because retail, and we have had a different history than cannabis, and I give credit to the Cannabis Control Board for your work in limiting advertising and in limiting concentration, some aspects that we haven't had in tobacco control. But in the tobacco retail environment, the advertising, marketing, and price promotions are very influential in use. And at the same time, is that what has made it more complicated for us in tobacco control is that the nicotine concentration in products, including sold in Vermont, have increased nearly 250% just over the last 4 years. This was recently published, and it's research by CDC and a nonprofit organization, the Truth Initiative. And so our job is made harder because we have 740 retailers. There's a lot of access to tobacco products in our communities, and that evidence shows the more density you have, the more retailers, not that it's the blame to any one retailer, but that the access to those products, the advertising, when you go in to get milk, you also see tobacco products being sold, is that it makes it harder for people to quit as well. So that's part of the dynamic. And then we have more addictive products coming onto the shelves that just makes it a more dynamic public health issue. And that recent evidence is also showing higher rates of smoking among pregnant women. And this is a real significant problem for Vermont, which we have a rate that's 2 times the national rate, and we're one of the top, unfortunately, 5 highest smoking rates among pregnant in Vermont. So we also look at retail density from that lens. So
Can I
as
ask
I
a quick
mentioned, yeah, go ahead.
question? I just want to make sure I'm following properly. Does the term smoking there include the kind of like vapor, like the vapes and the like nicotine pouches? And the like.
No, so I neglected to say that, and that's a great clarification. So in our recent data for Vermont, we're at 11% smoking rate. If we're looking at vaping, that is ranges. So it's 5% for adults, but 16% for high school students. And then we have breakdowns among age categories and among products. So when we say any tobacco product rate is inclusive of almost all of the products except nicotine pouches, which our survey data is just catching up for Vermont specific.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to. Okay. Yes, yeah. No, sorry to derail. I just.
No, it's a good question. So in 2012, we were invited by the CDC to be the first cohort of states to learn how to perform an audit retail. And with researchers at the University of North Carolina, we performed our first tobacco retail audit and published that in 2014. And we saw that that was really informative for us, not only just kind of put it and document it, just how many retail licensees we have, but also where are they and in what type of neighborhoods and what kind of products and price promotions. So we continued to prioritize doing retail audits. It got increasingly expensive for us to do that. So we started to partner more closely with Department of Liquor and Lottery and the Attorney General's office. And so we are pleased that 2022 and 2024 retail audits, unlike the I think we were spending $150,000 to $200,000 a year on doing a retail audit. We are now doing with DLL for a very low cost. And we added alcohol. So we're going to share some of those findings with you. You may be interested that the licensed retailers have gone down in terms of number over the past years. in part because we've lost some pharmacies, and many pharmacies in Vermont sold tobacco. So that is one reason why we see the number go down. Another reason is online sales. And while Vermont passed a law in 2019 to ban online sales and the mailing of them, just like the 2009 Family Smoking Control Act did at the national level, we still are working with DLL and the AG's office around illegal online sales and delivery. So which has probably dampened the retail sales. And so we have really, I think, benefited from doing this work in order to understand what the location and what they're carrying and how they are, meaning in some retail outlets, we're seeing price promotions that are quite dramatic. And it's loss of revenue for the state. It's also tactics that unfortunately target youth and low income. And I think it's just to say that the power of a retail audit is quite dramatic, I think, for some, like towns like Burlington or cities like Burlington. And so Burlington, the grantee that the Department of Health funds, but they took it on themselves to take our core audit, and they wanted to have all the liquor licenses in their mapping of what's it look like for, I think, alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis retail outlets together. So you can go to their website and look at their density map in case you're interested and read more about what they say in terms of community impact. So now I am going to pass it over to Melissa, and then I'll come back later and share some of our state findings.
Thanks, Rhonda. And thanks for the opportunity to share a few of our results. If the board has questions like you have previously, you can pop on in. We don't mind that at all. I'm mostly going to focus on the 2024 tobacco and alcohol retail audit results and some selected results. I'll pop in the URL to the public report if anyone here would like to see more. But really we'll focus on 3 key takeaways from that audit. So first, doing that audit regularly is critical to help us understand that market landscape and inform policy and public health efforts, particularly given the rapidly changing product types and displays. And we'll share a bit about what that looked like in 2024 by auditing new products like disposable e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches. Second, in Vermont, tobacco and alcohol retail density is an influential factor that is associated with increased use of these products. There's additional national evidence to support that as well. So the last one, we have found through these audits, and this has been pretty consistent over the years, that there's wide variation in the product types across counties. So we do see steep discounting of some of these products. And we'll go through some of those results so you can see the specifics there. So go to the next slide. Stuck. Okay, and when you start going, the first few slides here, we just, one of the new things that we did in 2024 is DLL did take pictures so that we, AG's office, and DLL could have, when we have had great conversations about how these products are displayed, what it looks like, etc. And this particular one here we pulled out is just one exemplar. If you go to the next slide, there's a variety of tobacco products displayed on this kind of third shelf down, and then just below it are free pet food samples. Just above it is kind of a hodgepodge of, some Midol, Tylenol, Advil, etc., lighters. And we see a lot of iterations of this. Sometimes near candy, usually what they were following, of course, because DLL is in there, following what they were supposed to do. Yet you could see the social norm implications when you see these products really close to candy or other, products that would be marketed more toward youth. You can keep on scrolling. So a few like highlights about some of these emerging products. Rhonda had already shown the number of retailers, which is around, 700 to 800. I think right now, I think it's 740 in this audit. When you have that many in a state like Vermont, DLL has been a wonderful partner, and that is a lot because we did census they censused every store. And so when you're thinking about enforcement regulation, that's a lot of stores for DLL to, with their resources to regulate, and they do an amazing job. And what that looks like, another implication is when you have products such as nicotine pouches and disposable e-cigarettes. We found in 2024, 70% of retailers in Vermont who had a tobacco license did sell nicotine pouches. That was new for 2024, so we don't have a comparison yet, but we will ask it again in 2026. We did ask about the number of retailers who sold e-cigarettes in 2022 and 2024, and that did increase from 46% in 2022 to 57% of those retailers sold e-cigarettes. And then among those that did sell e-cigarettes, the majority, 74%, sold disposable e-cigarettes. And again, just a few pictures. The one nicotine pouch display has some of those, buy two and save promotions as an example. Just one last note. So the Food and Drug Administration at the federal level has greatly narrowed down which products are authorized to sell. And that includes only 27 vape products, which are mostly unflavored. However, when we're going into these stores, we are seeing basically illegal products, but because of the volume and lack of resources, they're there. So it's a market with a lot of new products. We can keep going. That was the point. We have so much to say. The next set of results are really on density. So in Vermont, there's an average of 1.4 tobacco retailers per 1,000 adults that are age 18 or above. This varies a lot, as you can see on the maps. The left map is the county level per capita tobacco retailer density with location layered on top. And then just so you can see what that smoking prevalence is, the map on the right shows darker colors is a higher smoking prevalence. Again, for adults, and so Rhonda had said across the state, the prevalence is 11, but when you look at Caledonia County and Bennington, it's up to 18 to 19% in those counties. So there's a lot of variation by county. And then the darker colors on the left, you could see density up to 2.3 tobacco retailers per adults in Orleans and Lamoille counties. We also did find that in areas with lower socioeconomic status populations, there was a significantly higher density of tobacco retailers, which is concerning. So the two maps are displaying the geographic location of each retailer that sold tobacco during that 2024 audit, overlaid with county level social vulnerability. And so that refers to the resilience of communities when confronted by these external stresses on human health. Again, darker colors are going to indicate a higher level of social vulnerability. And I think I already said the main points. I know we're going to run close on time, so I'll keep on going and we can come back. We also did look at tobacco retailers and their location near schools, which also varied widely by county. In Vermont, 6% of tobacco retailers were located within 500 feet of schools, and that jumps up to 21% were within 1,000 feet of schools. Again, it varied widely by county. So in Orange County, 42% of tobacco retailers were within 1,000 feet of schools. In Lamoille, that was down to 7. And then we just pulled up a case example of some partnership between public health and a retailer near a school in St. Albans, which was a great example of a partnership. I won't read that, but I think you'll get these slides afterward. So tobacco retailers who were near schools were more likely to have price promotions than retailers that were not near schools, and the percentages are up at the top. That's the graph on the left. We also found that they're more likely to have advertised price promotions than retailers not near schools, and that matters because cheaper products mean greater access to youth or anybody, including those that maybe are addicted and want to quit whatever products they're using. We wanted to share some of the alcohol findings as well. So there's an average of 1.9 alcohol retailers per 1,000 adults, which is just slightly higher than tobacco. The far left map is the county level map of alcohol retailer density layered by location. Again, darker colors show greater density. So again, that goes up to 2.3 when you kind of get into the north central part of the state, and a little bit darker at the southern part of the state as well. And then we showed the other two maps are showing prevalence of heavy drinking and binge drinking. And we wanted to show both because the patterns are different by county. So you'll see heavy drinking, darker green areas. For heavy drinking is in the middle, and then binge drinking, the darker areas are up to 19 to 20% of binge drinking. And this is for adults only.
What is the gray, Melissa? If you go back, that middle map has a gray section up in the Northeast Kingdom. What is, either it's not coming through in the right color. What is, why is it a different? Oh, it says NA. Sorry, I couldn't see that at first. Thank you.
Great. It's just the N is too small. The number is too small. Thanks for that question.
All right. Thank you.
And then finally, we looked at the popularity of some of these emerging products and some price. So for alcohol, there is a minimum price in the state of Vermont. And so we did not collect data on prices for alcohol, but what we did collect is data starting in 2024 on ready-to-drink beverages. I didn't know hard Sunny D was a thing or hard Arizona tea was a thing, but it is. And so we collected, you can see here, 75% of alcohol retailers in Vermont sell these beverages in 2024. And then the Arizona branded beverages were by far the most common, but there's a whole variety in that bar chart. For tobacco, there is not a minimum price promotion. There is a decently comparatively to the nation, decent tax, but no minimum price, which means that Vermont is actually a site where there's a lot of couponing and discounting. So more than 1 in 3 Vermont tobacco retailers did have price promotions in 2024. We did not find a significant relationship between county level and number of tobacco retailers. And I'll say that with the caveat that we or DLL took products and had price promotion and prices for all kinds of products, including e-cigarettes. We had a lot of national conversations with partners about how to conceptualize that, and it's challenging. I won't get into the details, but I think it's a limitation there in terms of the data and look at across the number of just even e-cigarettes. There's a lot of variation in nicotine, volume, type of e-cigarette, etc. So when we didn't find a significant relationship, that's true. And I think there's some data limitations in terms of what we're able to see and how we conceptualize it, which is not a Vermont specific problem. The prices are pre-tax. And so we selected just one tobacco product to share with you all today, but we have other data in the full report. So the cheapest price of non-menthol cigarettes in 2024 varied from a minimum of $4.99 to a maximum of $12.60, with that average being $8.65. The map, the white, is going to be the cheapest average price of non-menthol cigarettes on average by county. And so the cheapest average price in the white was $8 to $8.33. And the darkest, which you can kind of see in the south east, would be $9.34 to $9.66. I will pass it back to you. I know that was a whirlwind and we have so much more to say, so I'll pass it back to you though, Rhonda.
Thank you, Melissa. So density in tobacco control and prevention is an equity issue. And it plays a part in the higher use rates we see in certain populations, in particular, those who are low income, those who, you know, are students or live near schools with higher density rates in those locations. And like Melissa showed, is that we see these higher use rates in counties that have higher densities. So there's a couple of examples here in Orleans County and Lamoille counties. And this just makes a much heavier lift for public health and our partners and grantees to engender the population level health benefits and impacts that we seek to do, including through our state health improvement plan.
Rhonda, I've got a question
Yeah.
about this. Are there any kind of hypotheses or conclusions about why the density increases prevalence? Is it just ease of access? Is it that the price is lower because you have all these stores that are competing for customers? Or is it like the advertising and branding that's in the windows of these shops that are kind of constantly reminding people to...
It's all of those. Yes.
Yeah.
And that there has been some improvement seen in Vermont. We see it in our retail data where, and I give a lot of credit to the tobacco prevention and substance use prevention grantees that the health department has funded for many years. So one of those is that we've seen a reduction in exterior advertising for tobacco products in the time frame that we've been doing these audits, because they've worked with local retailers to, you know, to speak to the significance of people being exposed on the exterior of the store and then also in the interior of the store. And that we have also seen some improvement in the reduction of stores within 1,000 feet of schools. I was looking at the 2018 data, and at that time we saw 40%, 38% of tobacco retailers were within 1,000 feet of a school. So our whether it's by attrition and movement of tobacco retailers moving away or closing, or a pharmacy that's closed. And I think some towns have taken steps to try and create either making it harder or less likely that they will locate near a school in terms of a new retailer.
Rhonda, when you say school, is that K through 12? Does that include colleges? Does it include like pre-K? What schools are you looking at? Oh, you're muted. You've muted yourself somehow.
Sorry about that. I think it's K through 12. Melissa, do you know?
It's K through 12, public and private.
Okay.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Oh, Rhonda, you muted again somehow.
I don't know why that's happening.
It's one of those days.
Yes. All right. So states and cities have taken steps to limit density, and our own state has taken steps to to do some limiting around alcohol licenses. And so in tobacco, we don't yet have that for Vermont, but we're continuing to work on it. So I just wanted to show that New York City has been very proactive in basically lowering the number of licenses over time for health equity purposes. And I would say from the reading I've done that most cities and states, it's not to say, you know, that we shouldn't have tobacco retailers, although in some states, like Massachusetts, towns can opt out of sales of tobacco like they can for cannabis in Vermont. But in Vermont, towns cannot opt out of tobacco sales. So there's something funky happening with this. Okay,
Yes.
finally. Is that overall is a state can or a town can establish a cap. It's our understanding, at least, that towns can do this, not necessarily by stating only X number. Maybe, you know, what Paul was sharing, there are a couple ways to do this where for in alignment with the health and safety measures in your town plan is that you are seeking to limit a product that is known to cause premature death. So that is one mechanism. Some cities have determined a rate. So per 1,000, what is the rate that we're comfortable with, and then decreasing that over time. And that seems to be pretty successful. And in looking at Vermont's rate that Melissa mentioned for tobacco retailers per 1,000, at 1.4 were higher than a recent study that was just published in August, including California and several other states that have pretty high areas of rural populations. Is a couple findings that you may just want to take note of is that that rural areas in general have a higher tobacco density. And that may be something just to, you know, think about because rural areas also have often lower incomes, lower job prospects, et cetera. And that Vermont's 1.4 retailer rate per 1,000 residents is higher than the 4 states surveyed in the study. And then lastly is, and I'm not at all a zoning expert, but that there seems to be a lot of discussion in tobacco control around using zoning to place retailers in areas that are farther away from neighborhoods, certainly, and other locations. And in terms of quickly just lessons learned in tobacco control as it relates to density is that it's hard to reduce. The processes to approve a license are easier than it is to remove once in place. And retail outlets increase access to substances, which impacts community, family, and individual health. We do a lot of work around understanding what these impacts look like from a disease, cancer, and cost perspectives in tobacco control, and that retail outlets do play an influential factor in that. And like the third bullet is, I think, asking ourselves, you know, I serve on my local select board, is what other business or development doesn't happen because of a tobacco, alcohol, cannabis, or paraphernalia outlets. And I know that there are some towns that have really worked to try to create, you know, commercial spaces that are family friendly and community health friendly. So with that, we collected some resources that we use today, and that some that may be of interest, and including a very recent systematic review published in the Lancet that, because there's not as much written about cannabis and density, but here is a study that has looked at it. So in case that's helpful, I thought to include that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ron, I've got a question that, if you don't know the answer, it's fine. But how prevalent is the illicit market with respect to tobacco or nicotine products in Vermont? We have a very kind of vibrant illicit market and hemp, like intoxicating hemp market, that operate right alongside our regulated market. And there is a desire, one of the legislature's desires was to shift consumers away from those illicit products towards regulated products for the existing consumers, not try to create new consumers, but try and shift the existing ones
Shift
towards
it.
as a
Right.
harm reduction effort. And so I'm
Right.
curious if there's what the status of illicit tobacco in, you mentioned the online sales. I imagine that's
Yeah.
all illicit.
That's the major problem in illicit sales for us. And we are doing a memo of understanding with Department of Liquor and Lottery to provide some funding to increase online enforcement for tobacco. But they also do see other products, and that's been helpful, like vitamin vapes and alcohol vapes. So they can inform and take action as needed on those types of products too. Under what, one of the things that our statute does offer is a wide definition of tobacco substitutes, which is the definition that vaping products are under, and other substances are included in that definition. When I started with the health department in 2011, I think it was more of an issue then in terms of out of the back, trunk sales that were unstamped cigarettes predominantly. But I will say that, I think a fairly common reason for convenience stores robberies are for cigarettes. So that while I think it's gone down in terms of illicit unstamped products, the AG's office is, I think, considering how to, like Melissa mentioned, can we curtail these non-FDA approved vape products in particular from being on our store shelves? It's a big problem. So there's that part of the illicit market that we're dealing with too.
How effective, in your opinion, has the delivery sales ban been? Or is that a question for the Attorney General?
I think it's a great question to ask the Attorney General's office. I will say that it was impressive work that over several years, and I saw our Attorney General's office present on the data. I think it was maybe in 2021 at a conference, and that is, they had a number of illegal sales happening up to $1 million, right under $1 million in settlement came to our state from that work, and that what the Attorney General's office was starting to hear over this 2.5 year period was, oh, the word's out that Vermont is enforcing its online sales delivery ban. Now, then other parties and we got pulled away from that. But from what we can tell, and I'll mention this project that we will have a data brief on, is one of our grantees collected confiscated vapes in every county at schools in Vermont. And these are predominantly nicotine vapes, but there are some cannabis vapes. and that we are able to describe what was found in those, what kind of products were they? And there are definitely products that are not in retail environment. So we know that we still have most likely an online sales problem.
Wow. Well, just to preempt any sort of hate that we may get, we're not saying that cannabis is the same as tobacco or alcohol, but I think it's important. This issue around retail siting for us historically has always been framed up about, are we kind of stifling, supporting the retailers, or and there's, I think, a lot more nuance and a lot more lessons learned that we can take from just the examples of other industries that have been through this before.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate the help, as always. Department of Health has been with us from the very beginning, kind of advising us and helping us along.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your efforts too. And if you have any follow-up questions, we'd be happy to answer them. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay. Let's see what's on the agenda. So I know that we had next a review of the settlement agreement. We removed that. I will just say, though, about the advertising settlement agreement, that I really appreciate the kind of diligence of our Attorney General's office, our General Counsel, and the plaintiff who really spent a lot of time trying to come to a common sense solution that still maintains a lot of the legislative priorities that were kind of central to the compromise that led to the passage of the bill, while also reducing administrative burden both here and amongst the licensed community. And I think that we will run through exactly what we mean by that at our next meeting, once that has been decided, once the kind of agreement has been finalized. So the next thing is an executive session. I know historically we try to do these after the executive director report, but I think the two issues that we have, just out of kind of an administrative, out of decency to everyone watching, instead of having two separate executive sessions, we're just going to have one beforehand. So is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Mm-hmm. Pursuant to 1 VSA subsection 313A1E, I move that the board enter executive session to discuss matters of which premature public knowledge would clearly place the board and others at substantial disadvantage, specifically attorney-client communications with the board's counsel. And when that matter is concluded, we will remain in closed session as permitted by 1 VSA 312E for quasi-judicial deliberation on a complex licensee application.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Patrick, I'm going to try and, because we're doing it in this order, try and keep this as short as possible. I assume, just given the complexity of the issues, about half an hour. So why don't we kind of shoot to be back at 3:00? And if you wouldn't mind just putting up the away message. Okay. And we're still recording. All right. So just as a time check, this is our regular CCB meeting. It's Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. It's 3:09 p.m. And we are out of executive session. And I think we need to look through the executive director report.
Yes, and the real executive director is gone, so I will stand in and can give you the data.
Great. You need this.
Stuck on forever.
No, she's coming back, and you'll want her back even earlier once you see my presentation. But I should thank Liz Love for getting data and helping me to look like I know what it's about. So, okay. Great. All right. So here is the report that would be the executive director's report. Here we are. All the data in the report is current through the 15th of September, unless otherwise noted. I'm going to start with a snapshot of the active adult use license count for all types across the past year. As you can see, we're now at 594 active licenses. That's 11 fewer than last month, but 30 more than a year ago. We continue to monitor active license data closely to help track the health of the market and to quickly identify anomalies. Because a majority of license types and tiers are closed to new applications, modest attrition is to be expected. So bear that in mind as you look at the slow declines in numbers. It would be more surprising if those didn't happen. Here's a look at licenses by type across the most recent quarter. Cultivators vastly outnumber other license types because we have so many small craft growers. So keep that in mind. You're going to see them disproportionately represented everywhere because they're more numerous. Taking a closer look at the chart, we continue to see a reduction in the cultivator category month over month. We're now at 374, down from 384 in August, which is trending downward from 394 in July and 400 in June. The board keeps a close eye on relinquishment numbers and surveys folks to get the reasons for relinquishment to see what we can do to better maximize opportunity and minimize entry barriers. But as we discussed, that attrition is somewhat natural in the context. The one additional retail license that popped in August is nominal only. It's the result of an integrated licensee converting to its constituent license parts. In case anybody's wondering, why did we pick up a retailer when that wasn't really possible? So here we have adult use licensees by priority status. The ratios are almost unchanged since last month. You're looking at all the active licensees through the lens of their priority status. And we just want to make sure that there's not a disproportionate impact falling on different demographic groups. And we're seeing that happily that is not the case. Next, this slide gives you a deeper dive into active cultivator license. The slide shows cultivators broken down by type and tier. As you may recall from an earlier slide, we reported a net decrease of 10 cultivators month over month, which is reflected here. Overall, tier 1 remains the most common type. Pretty much in line with what you've seen in prior months. Really no surprise here. I can leave it up for just a second so folks can have a closer look if they'd like. Okay, the slide now in front of you shows the same cultivator license data broken down by type and tier, but now across the last 3 months, giving you a clearer picture of gains and losses over time. The green columns represent September data. Here you can see the exact month-to-month changes. For example, October tier 1 dropped by 2 licenses from 78 to 76, while indoor tier 1 fell by 4 and mixed tier 1 declined by 3. These numbers also continue to track with prior months and expectations, so no real surprises or reasons for alarm are seen in there. Here we've got a quick look at the manufacturer licenses, again, including the most recent quarter's data. As you can see, the numbers are very stable. September data is in the last block, and the only change from month to month is the departure of that one tier 1 licensee. Here is a comparison of your indoor and outdoor license canopy by square footage. Indoor canopy is depicted in light green and outdoor is yellow. The total amount of licensed canopy is now 879,000 square feet, down from 898,500 square feet last month. That's a drop of 11,500. As with similar metrics, we see the expected attrition. What's interesting here is the closing gap between indoor and outdoor canopy. A year ago, outdoor canopy outpaced indoor by 154,500 square feet. Today, that delta is down almost 2/3 to 58,000. So you can see those coming together, which is a notable trend. Next, an overview of our adult use program and new issuances and relinquishments. The left chart breaks down the quarter's relinquishments by priority status of the businesses. The right chart illustrates the types and tiers of licenses owned. Sorry, I'm not practiced at this, not to touch the touchpad when I shouldn't. The right chart illustrates the types and tiers of licenses relinquished in the quarter. Again, here, tier one attrition is going to stand out in gross terms, but it's not really out of ratio because tier ones are so numerous relative to other license types. Next, we'll have a look at compliance and enforcement data and see what the compliance unit has been working with in the most recent month. We're starting with a snapshot of the agency's inspection and investigation activity broken down by license type. In total, the team conducted 99 inspections in September. Those are shown in dark blue. It's been engaged in 17 active investigations. Those are shown in red. Most site visits and all investigations focused on cultivation and retail licensees this month. Here you have a closer look at the types of investigations underway in the past 30 days. Each color represents a different subject of investigation. Red is retail, yellow manufacturing, green cultivation. Most of these are self-explanatory. One of the murkier ones is employee issues. That usually means possession of valid ID cards or inadequacies of training. And then the category for outside license translates roughly to activity outside the scope of a licensee's license. The products category is going to cover issues related to products, obviously, other than the COA. The COA would be covered by pesticide and pathogen categories. So we're talking about the issues with the products such as expiry, registration issues, consumer quality complaints. Moving on, we've got another look at the types of actions that the compliance team performed each month this quarter. The September data is green. If you look at the last block, our recorded complaint count jumped to 46. That's up from a lull the month prior. We issued 15 letters of warning this month. Additionally, the compliance team oversaw 3 product destructions. That's down 3 from the prior month. And they documented 10 cessations. That's down 5 from the prior month.
That's a 10. That's not a 0.
On this slide you were just on.
The cease of operations. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like that's a typo. Or oh, you know what it is? The 1.
The 1 is like,
lining up with
okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think 10 is correct.
It happens here too.
Yeah.
Okay, another 10. So that the top advertising number is a 10, just like in the prior slide. Sorry about that. So you've got to look here at how last month's complaints break down by subject this time. Categories are mostly self-explanatory. The dismissed category means that the complaint didn't articulate a violation, so it didn't belong in the category. Business operations is a little bit of a catch-all, but it would apply, for example, to deficient record keeping, SOPs, policies, or quality controls. The other category is pretty much self-explanatory. Pardon me.
The unpaid invoices, is that something that we have the enforcement ability?
I'm glad you paused on that one because we get a lot of complaints about it. You know, we record them when they come in, just whether or not they warrant action or they can be acted on. But I'm really glad you stopped us on that one because it gives an opportunity to kind of share with people what they can do if they have an unpaid invoice. And I think the message from the board is we do care because we want to see big patterns. If we have somebody who's in financial distress, somebody who is habitually, as a business practice, failing to pay invoices or meet contractual commitments, that can become a licensing issue as a pattern. What's important, I think, to emphasize to people is we're an administrative agency. Only the judiciary, the courts, can award damages. So we have no authority to say, you know, you're in licensing trouble if you don't pay, you know, the $500 you owe on this contract because we've decided it's owed. So it's kind of a split message. Do please tell us if you're getting shorted on invoices, but do it with the expectation and understanding that you really got to do your own collections in the court. We're more about helping the next guy and preventing patterns of misconduct. We can, as you know from the new Rule 1, you can make that an issue at renewal if you've got somebody who just never pays invoices. Yeah. So enough said about that, but a good one to dwell on. And as we were talking about before, we voluntarily survey folks who are leaving the market to get their reasons. And so these are the reasons reported as motivating considerations by licensees who are terminating operations. They're not mutually exclusive. People can choose more than one category that they attribute their choice to. And the field agents try to learn about that because it helps inform your policymaking, and you learn more about what you can do to make the world better for folks to stay in the industry. Not every pressure is within your control, and sometimes people move out of the field for reasons totally unrelated to regulatory or market dynamics. There's family reasons, or the line wasn't, they just had something else they wanted to do with their land, for example. Nonetheless, knowing people's experiences can help you drive policy. So these are the reasons that folks were given. The usual leaders are leading the pack this time. I think overhead associated with banking and insurance figures prominently. And we do sometimes hear from small cultivators increasingly that they're challenged by supply chain consolidation. Folks just continue to do business with their suppliers, making it a little hard to break in. Now we'll look at that. The 15 letters of warning broke down in the way that you see. It's not unusual to see kind of waves of focus by the compliance unit on one compliance division on one topic or another. So you can see employee issues were really the hot button and most common subject this quarter, or the last month rather, I should say. One coming out of inspections, 2 insurance lapses. Those usually become evident when entity renews and doesn't have the insurance policy we were expecting. An on-site consumption, 1 issue with sales reporting, 2 advertising issues. So pretty much typical in terms of the breakdown, with a little bit of focus on employee issues in the most recent month. We'll move on to the medical program data. As before, these numbers are current through the 18th of September. This slide is showing you the medical program patient and caregiver data for the last 12 months from September of 24 to September of 25. Year over year, our caregiver count is just slightly up from 122 in September of 24 to 126 in September of 25. The total patient caregiver count, patient and caregiver count, I should say, was trending down until April. But we are now showing small increases in the last few months that have resulted in overall increase in registrant count by 203 when compared to September 2024. We're now at 2,914 patients and caregivers. This could be an anomaly, but it probably more likely represents a revival of interest from persons with qualifying conditions coming from awareness that medical sales will soon be available from endorsed retailers at more sites. We're going to continue to keep an eye on that one to see how it develops.
It's a pretty steady increase over the last, 6 months, 5 months?
Yes, and it followed a pretty notable decline for a long time. So
that's interesting.
The hunch is that means people are thinking ahead to the very soon to be availability of medical lists. Okay, now we're done with the data portion of the report and on to staff recommendations for licensure. Here's what I've got for you. There are no new license issuances this month, so we're moving on to the conventional license renewals recommended for approval. I'm going to stop and just leave a minute of silence for people who are looking, who want to have a look at the table and might need more time than it would take me to say what these are. But these are your ordinary on-time renewals, all of which are recommended. Everything appearing on the table is recommended for the board to act favorably upon. Go to the next slide. Same category. We're continuing with conventional renewals that are recommended by staff for your approval. I should note that Apex Arboretum had a hearing, and we'll get actually a written decision if they're on this list. But when you make your motion, you'll actually exclude them, not for any bad reason, but because they had a hearing, and we'll get a paper result. And by the way, the license continues in force while you're making your decision. I don't want anybody nervous. But everybody else, conventional renewals, a third page of conventional renewals.
They had a affiliations hearing with respect to a prospective manufacturing license.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think that cultivation license is not.
You're right. I panicked when I saw it, and I forgot they had two guys. So anyway, this is why we need all good back. Forget every complicated thing I said about Apex Arboretum. Totally normal, and they will be included.
Yeah, and then this is a wholesale license.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I confused those two license types. So
You just scared them, Gabe.
I just terrify people when I do this, and they're going to be so glad when Olga's back. So anyway, my apologies to the Apex Arboretum folks. Totally normal. They're in the pile with everybody else for now. So this is your third page of conventional renewals, and the fourth and final page of conventional renewals. At this point, it probably would be appropriate to take a motion relative to the 4 slides of conventional renewals recommended for approval.
Is there a motion to approve the recommended renewal applications?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve the renewals listed with issuance subject to final payment and any required fees. Final payment of any required fees and other contingencies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so here we have an applicant. This is Sweet Rhapsody LLC doing business as Skunk Hollow. An incumbent licensee who would like to move to a smaller tier. They're moving from a mixed 5 to an indoor 1. And the reason for doing that is just it's better matched to their actual operations. If you're carrying excess capacity, you're paying for it. And so that's the explanation for these belonging in a different category. Staff find everything in order and recommend that you approve that change and renewal.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this change of tier?
I move that the board adopt the staff recommendations for renewal and change in tier type for the application listed with issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we'll move on. These are our third, fourth, and fifth retailers. In the previous regular meeting, you approved the first 2 retailers that were qualified to hold the new retailer with medical endorsement license. Licensing team recommends that these be approved. A reminder here that Rule 343B, as well as the board's rulemaking statute, requires specific enhanced training for patient-facing retail staff in 7 categories. Consequently, there will be a slight delay before the new indoor Cs, the 3 that you see here, as well as the 2 from the previous regular meeting, can transact sales to medical patients. We expect that training module to be ready, I think, in November is the track that it's on. So we appreciate everybody's patience with that. Some folks have asked, does this apply to medical sales if the product is also available for adult use sale? It does. You can't transact you can't treat the patient qua patient until staff have the special training that the law requires to deal with medical patients.
And has that been clearly communicated to them? I mean, I know that we're doing this right now as an for administrative purposes, but do they know that they're paying for something that they're not going to get they're paying for that medical use endorsement, the $250, they're not going to get the full benefit of until they have a trained employee?
Yes, and they've all made that choice, I think, informed. It's only a 250-degree delta, so it's not a huge amount of money.
Right.
And the licensing team, because of the expenses in the business office of refunding and prorating, their policy is no matter where you come in on the calendar, you pay the extra $250.
Yeah, okay.
So everybody's being treated equally, although those who come in right at the renewal obviously are going to economize in a way that people that pay $250 mid-cycle won't.
Okay.
But I do think they understand that, and they get a letter reminding them with their issuance not to use it yet until the training.
Yep.
Oh, I'm, okay. Okay.
We have to vote on that last one, I think,
For the, okay,
for the renewals with the with the medical endorsement.
okay.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve these renewals?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to renew the licenses listed with the medical use endorsement with issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good. On this slide, you have a reinstatement of Crystal Mountain LLC. This was an interesting case. This falls within the 60-day redemption period permitted by your new Rule 1 that became effective in July. The applicant expired. They because of some difficulties that they were having, getting teed up for renewal. They cooperated fully in ceasing operations with, full compliance or full cooperation with their compliance agent. They later found themselves able to qualify for the renewal within that redemption period. Staff have been all through it, and they are comfortable recommending that the board revive and renew the license. The licensing period will be the same as it ever was. It's not starting over. And this will just be treated as a renewal that happened to be preceded by a brief interruption.
Okay. This is the first of its kind, right?
Mhm.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Is there a motion to reinstate Crystal Mountain LLC?
I move that the board accept the staff recommendation to revive and renew the application listed, subject to final payment of any required fees and other contingencies.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's great, and should say how much we appreciate the folks when they did have that interruption cooperating with the compliance agent. What we can't have is loose cannabis around with no license, and they were great about doing that, which really facilitated our bringing things back in line. Okay, here are late but complete renewal applications. The staff recommend that you exercise your discretion under Rule 1 to accept the late applications. If you do, the applicants are found by the staff and analysts to meet renewal applications after some hiccups. I'll note that there are some asterisks you see there. Those represent tier changes. If you see one asterisk, that's somebody tiering down from an outdoor 2. And if you see 2 asterisks, that's somebody tiering down from a Manu 2.
Okay.
So everybody else is just a conventional renewal, except for those that are the 2 that are moving tier.
Is there a motion to accept and approve these late renewals?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to accept and approve the late applications listed with issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. This is a request that that you continue the license in force and table it until next month. The establishment on this slide is renewing late and requesting to tier down from a mixed 2 to a mixed 1. Staff awaiting required verification paper, basically from the Department of Taxes. They fully expect they'll have that by next month. But because they can't renew without that, the request from staff and the applicant is that you table them until next month and continue the license in force.
Great. Is there a motion to accept and continue?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendation to accept and continue the late applications listed with issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Finally, we have one applicant for renewal. This is Korea Commons LLC. And this is a case where the board had kind of decided based on its earlier deliberations that it could use more information before trying to decide about an affiliations related issue. So despite the applicant having cooperated, fully provided all information, I think the sense is that there are a few more questions to straighten out just because of the complexity of the ownership structure. So staff have recommended, and I think you seem to be in line with that recommendation, that you table the application to your next meeting. Pursuant to the Administrative Procedure Act, the license remains in full force and effect because a complete application has been made. So it doesn't expire, just continues so that you can collect information and make your decision when you have time. But the recommendation is that you table it and get your license.
Table it until our October meeting.
Yeah.
which is October 29th. And if we need to, at our affiliate or our evidentiary hearing, we can bring them in if we need to. And
You can, and even if you had to go into November, the protection from the Administrative Procedure Act would continue and the license would continue in force as long as you needed to.
Great. Any questions for Gabe about this one?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. Is there a motion to extend and defer action?
So the board has concluded that we need more information before acting on the renewal application of Korea Commons LLC. This is because the company is large and has a complex ownership structure relative to another manufacturer. In a case like this, when the board needs more time to work on a renewal, the license continues in full force and effect pursuant to 3 VSA subsection 814B. Consequently, I move that we table the Korea Commons renewal to our next meeting on October 29th so that we can collect the needed details.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I learned in a dramatic moment
We have a new application.
earlier that I misled you when I said probably terrified these poor people. When I said that there were no new applications, there was one that was accidentally omitted from the list. Phantom Farms LLC is going to be a Manu Tier 1. Social equity applicant. Staff are happy with what they've seen and recommend that you approve them. And I will apologize for any drama that I've caused among the viewers.
Your inbox is full now.
Yeah, they were a phantom slide. It's very easy to mark them off. And
It's been a long day.
so sorry.
Is there a motion to approve this initial application?
Yes, I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve this initial application with issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Congratulations.
Congratulations and my personal apologies to Phantom Farms. It's terrible. And then, yeah, this is an errant slide that was carried over. So you are at the end of your executive directorship board.
Thank you.
To your considerable relief.
Thank you for doing that, Gabe. Pulling double duty today. Anything else? I don't think there's anything left on the agenda. But anything we will need to do while we're still in this meeting? No? Okay, well then I will adjourn. Thank you very much, everyone. And congratulations to Phantom Farms. New application. To everyone else that was
Good
renewed.
job surviving.
Thank you.
Okay.